A voice broke the silence of my heart and said, "Leave your homeland and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you." This voice was not audible to the ears, but was clearer and more powerful than the roar of any storm. "I will make you into a great nation. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And through you, all the peoples of the earth will be blessed." These were the words of the Lord that marked the beginning of my story. I am Abraham, born as Abram in Ur of the Chaldeans, a prosperous city in Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers nourish the land with life. My father, Terah, was a respected man, but our lives were ordinary, marked by the seasons and the rituals of a polytheistic society. The divine call was both an awakening and a break. "I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing." How could someone like me, a mere mortal among many, be chosen for such a destiny? The promise was as overwhelming as the night sky under which I stood. And it is here, at 75 years old, that my incredible story begins. When I decided to overcome fear and embark on the journey, I could never have imagined that I would live to be 178 years old, or that I would have a great lineage. Here begins my account. With a heart full of hope and an emerging faith, I obeyed the Lord and set out with my wife, Sarai, Lot my nephew, and all our belongings, along with the people we had gathered. We headed toward the land of Canaan, a journey filled with hope, guided by the divine promise. We traveled northwest through Haran and eventually arrived in Canaan, a land of rolling hills and fertile valleys. It was a diverse region inhabited by Canaanite peoples in fortified city-states, each ruled by its own king. Life in Canaan was different from life in Ur. Here, fields and vineyards stretched as far as the eye could see, and the scent of olive trees and fig trees filled the air. We saw that, although the land before us was rich and promising, it was occupied by other peoples and cultures. I traveled through the country to the holy place of Shechem, under the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were the owners of those lands. It was there that the Lord appeared to me again, with the divine promise. We traveled northwest through Aran, and finally arrived in Canaan, a land of rolling hills and fertile valleys. It was a diverse region inhabited by Canaanite peoples in fortified city-states, each governed by its own king. Life in Canaan was different from Ur. Here, fields and vineyards stretched as far as the eye could see, and the scent of olive trees and fig trees filled the air. We realized that, although the land before us was rich and promising, it was occupied by other peoples and cultures. I traveled through the country to the holy place of Shechem, under the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were the owners of those lands. It was there that the Lord appeared to me again, making a promise. Afterward, I moved towards the mountainous region east of Bethel, and between Bethel to the west and Ai to the east, I set up my camp. There, too, I built an altar to the Lord and called upon His name, marking every place I stayed with an act of faith and devotion. However, the test of our faith was not long in coming. The Promised Land, which had welcomed my steps under the blessing of a divine promise, soon became inhospitable under the burden of a severe famine. "Why have you brought us to this place?" I asked, looking up to the sky for answers. The decision to depart for Egypt, the land of the Nile, and its full granaries, was made with sorrow, knowing that it tested the promise of the Almighty to care for my family and me. "Do not fear, Abraham," the promise resounded. "I am your shield. Your reward will be very great." Yet, aware of Sarai's beauty and fearing for my life, I devised a plan. In return, I obtained sheep, cattle, donkeys, maidservants, female donkeys, and camels. My stay in Egypt was marked by the dissonance between the opulence of the palaces and the slavery of many of its inhabitants. However, the Lord inflicted great plagues upon Pharaoh and his people because of Sarai. Pharaoh, realizing the truth, confronted me. "What have you done to me? Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she was your sister, allowing me to take her as my wife? Here is your wife. Take her and go." After this, he ordered his men to escort us out along with Sarai and all our possessions. When we were expelled from Egypt, we not only returned to Canaan with more than we had brought, but also with a deeper understanding of the nature of our God, a protector, a provider, an infallible guide in times of uncertainty. From Egypt, I ascended to the Negev with my wife and all our possessions, and Lot was coming with us. By God's blessing, he had accumulated great wealth in livestock, silver, and gold. We continued our journey north, returning to Bethel, to the place of our first campsite, between Bethel and Ai, where I had previously built an altar to the Lord and where I would again invoke his name. Lot, who accompanied me, also possessed sheep, cattle, and tents. Our possessions had grown so much that the space was no longer sufficient for us and our flocks, which led to conflicts between my shepherds and Lot's. At that time, the territory was inhabited by the Canaanites and the Perizzites, which further complicated the situation. To avoid disputes and to maintain peace, I proposed a solution to Lot. There should be no conflicts between us or between our shepherds, for we are family. Look, all the land is before you. If you choose to go left, I will go right. If you prefer to go right, I will head to the left. Lot observed the valley of the Jordan, which was a fertile land like the garden of the Lord, or like Egypt before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So he chose for himself all the plain of the Jordan and moved eastward, separating us physically. I remained in Canaan while Lot settled near Sodom, whose inhabitants were known for their wickedness and sin against the Lord. After Lot and I took separate paths, the Lord spoke to me again, reaffirming his promise. Lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see I give to you and your descendants forever. I will make your descendants as numerous as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could count the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be counted. Following the Lord's command, I traveled through the land in its length and width, aware of the divine promise that had been granted to me. Finally, I moved my camp and settled by the oaks of Mamre and Hebron, where I built an altar to the Lord and communed with him, grateful for his guidance and the promises of blessing for me and my descendants. One day, the Lord appeared to me while I was sitting at the entrance of my tent in the oaks of Mamre. It was the hottest part of the day. Lifting my eyes, I noticed 3 men standing near me, and without hesitation, I ran to them. From the entrance of my tent, I bowed down to the ground in a sign of respect and hospitality, saying, "My Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Please let me bring you a little water, so that you may wash your feet and rest under this tree. I will bring a morsel of bread, so that you may be refreshed before you go on your way, for you have passed by your servant." They said, "Do as you have said." Immediately I went to the tent where Sarah was, and urgently asked her, "Quickly, take 3 measures of the best flour, knead it, and make cakes." Then I ran to the herd. I selected a tender and well-fed calf, and gave it to a servant to prepare without delay. I served curds, milk, and the prepared calf to our guests, standing by them under the tree while they ate. It was then that they asked me about Sarah, my wife, and I answered that she was in the tent. One of them, whose words carried a weight of divine promise, said, "I will surely return to you at this time next year, and then Sarah will have a son." Sarah, who was listening from the entrance of the tent, internally skeptical about the idea of experiencing the joy of motherhood and fatherhood at our advanced age. The Lord, aware of Sarah's laughter, questioned me. Why did Sarah laugh, thinking that she cannot have a son in her old age? Is there anything too difficult for the Lord? At the appointed time, next year, Sarah will have a son. Sarah, fearful, denied having laughed, but the Lord affirmed, "No, you did laugh." After the men departed for Sodom, I reflected on the divine purpose and prepared to bid them farewell. The Lord shared with me his plans. Pondering whether I should conceal from myself what was about to happen in Sodom and Gomorrah, given that I would be the founder of a great and blessed nation, chosen to teach justice and righteousness to my descendants. Before the impending destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, I approached the Lord, advocating for the city. Will you destroy the righteous along with the guilty? If there are 50 righteous people in the city, will you destroy it anyway? The Lord promised to spare the city for the sake of the 50 righteous. My concern for justice led me to intercede further, reducing the number of righteous needed to prevent the city's destruction down to 10. The Lord, in his mercy, agreed not to destroy it if he found those 10 righteous, when the 2 angels arrived in Sodom that evening. My nephew Lot was sitting at the city gate. Upon seeing them, he rose to greet them, showing respect and bowing to the ground. He begged them, "Please come to the house of your servant to spend the night. You can wash your feet and in the morning continue on your way." Although initially reluctant to spend the night in the square, Lot insisted so much that they finally accepted his hospitality and went to his house. There, Lot prepared a meal for them, baking unleavened bread, and they ate together. It wasn't long before the men of Sodom, from young to old, surrounded the house, demanding that Lot hand over the men who had come so they could abuse them. Lot went out to confront them, closing the door behind him, and begged them not to commit such wickedness. He even offered his 2 virgin daughters instead of allowing them to harm his guests, a desperate decision showing his commitment to protect those who had come to his home. The mob, however, rejected him and threatened to treat him worse than the others. Just when they were trying to force the entrance, the angels intervened, saving Lot and blinding the aggressors so they could not find the door. Afterwards, the angels revealed to Lot the purpose of their visit. The impending destruction of Sodom because of its great wickedness prompted Lot to gather his great wickedness. God urged Lot to gather his great wickedness. God urged Lot to gather his family and leave the city, his family and leave the city. He tried to warn his sons-in-law, but they did not heed him. They did not take him seriously, and, at Lot's hesitation, the angels took him. At Lot's hesitation, the angels took him by the hand, along with his wife and daughters, and led him out of the city. They took him by the hand along with his wife and daughters, and led him out of the city. They led him out of the city by the mercy of the Lord, by the mercy of the Lord. Once safe, the angels warned Lot to run away. To the mountains without looking back, Lot was afraid, and asked for shelter in a small town nearby. Small town nearby Zor. The angel agreed allowing Lot and his family to take refuge there as the sun rose, and Lot arrived at Zor. The Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah with brimstone and fire from heaven. Lot's wife, obeying the command not to look back, she became a pillar of salt the next morning. Next morning, I returned to the place where I had stood before the Lord, with horror as the smoke of destruction. Destruction ascended from the ground. Divine judgment had fallen upon Sodom and Gomorrah, the Lord. Gomorrah, the Lord, remembered his promise to me, and saved Lot, a testimony of divine justice and mercy. Even during the judgment, the devastation of those cities was a reminder. Those cities was a grim reminder of the consequences of sin and the importance of obedience to God. From there, I moved to the Neb, settling, to bring Sarah to her palace, however. That night, God intervened in an impressive way. In an impressive way, he appeared in a dream to Abimelech in a dream, and warned him that he was about to make a grave mistake by taking Sarah, for she was my wife. Abimelech, surprised and frightened by the dream, he defended his innocence before God, claiming that he had acted in good faith, based on the information that both Sarah and God in his mercy answered him that it was. God in his mercy replied that he was aware of his innocence, and that was precisely why he had intervened, to prevent him from sinning against him, ordered him to return to Sarah, and added that I, being a prophet, intercede for him so that he should not die at dawn. Abimelech summoned his servants and told them what had happened, which caused great fear among them. Then he called me and confronted me with great anguish, asking me why I had acted in such a way as to expose him and his kingdom to commit such a sin. So in my defense, I explained that I believed that there was no fear of God in war, and that I feared for my life because of my wife. I also revealed that although I had said that Sarah was my sister, I was not lying, because she was really my half-sister and my wife. My half-sister and my wife, I told her that, since God had made me leave my home too. I agreed with Sarah to say that she was my sister, to protect us Abimelech in a gesture of goodwill, and to repair the misunderstanding. He gave me Sarah back to me and compensated us with sheep, cows, slaves, and offered his land for us to settle wherever and Sarah was given 1,000 silver coins as a form of. Silver coins as a way of cleanse her. After this incident, God intercedes for Abimelech, his family, and his maidservants, so that they could have children again, since God had closed the womb of all the women in Abimelech's house because of Sarah. God heard my prayer and healed everyone in Abimelech's house, showing once again his mercy and power. The Lord visited Sarah and me. me in a miraculous way fulfilling his promise. Promise in a way that surpassed all our expectations. Our expectations Sarah conceived and bore me a son in my old age just as God had announced. Announced at the birth of our son, I named him Isaac. Obeying God at all times. At all times 8 days after his birth, I circumcised Isaac, faithfully following God's instructions at that time. At that time, I was 100 years old. Testimony of God's power and faithfulness. God Sarah, overflowing with joy, exclaimed, God has given me mood to laugh, and all who hear about it will laugh. Those who hear about it will laugh. With me, we never imagined that in our old age we would be blessed with the joy of having the day Isaac was weaned, celebrated with a great feast marking the beginning of a new stage in our lives. However, not everything in our family was a cause for celebration. One day Sarah observed Ishmael, the son that Hagar had given me, making fun of Isaac. This led Sarah to ask me to expel Hagar and her son, because she didn't want that. Ishmael would share the inheritance with Isaac. This request distressed me deeply. Ishmael was also my son, but God intervened by saying to me, do not grieve for the child or for your slave. Do what? Sarah tells you because it is through Isaac that your descendants will be recognized, but also from the son of the bondwoman I will make a nation because he is your descendant with a heavy heart, but trusting in God's promise. I prepared Hagar and Ishmael for their departure, giving them provisions for the journey and bidding them farewell at dawn. God did not abandon Ishmael when Hagar and the child were in a desperate situation in the wilderness. God intervened, assuring them a future and divine protection. Ishmael grew up in the wilderness, in the desert, to become an experienced archer, and his mother married him to an Egyptian woman at that time. Abimelech and Pekal, the commander of his army, recognized God's blessing on my life, and sought to secure a relationship of mutual loyalty to me. I vowed to treat them with the same loyalty they had shown me. However, tensions arose over a well that Abimelech's servants had. Despite this conflict, we were able to reach an agreement, and we concluded an alliance sealed with the exchange of gifts and the oath in Beersheba, which means well of the oath. After those significant events in my life. One day God decided to test me. Abraham called me. Here I am, I answered, always ready to listen to his voice. It was then that he gave me an instruction that would make any father's heart tremble. Take your only son Isaac, whom you love so much, you love so dearly. Go to the region of Moriah and offer him up as a burnt offering on the mountain, that I will. I cannot begin to describe the storm of emotions that overcame me at that moment. However, with unshakable faith, in unwavering faith in God, I got up early the next day. I prepared my donkey, and together with two of my servants and my beloved son Isaac, I cut the wood for the sacrifice, and we set out for the place that God had appointed on the third day of our journey. From afar I could see the destination we were. I told my servants to wait with the donkey, that he would wait with the donkey. While Isaac and I continued, we will worship, and then we will return to them. Let's make sure that we will be sure. I put him on the altar when I stretched out my hand to take the knife and do what I had been commanded. A voice from Abraham was the angel of the Lord calling me. Here I am. I responded, and the angel instructed me not to harm the boy, demonstrating that my fear of God, proving that my fear of God was genuine by not having denied my only son. I then looked and I saw a ram caught by the horns in a bush. I took it and offered it as a burnt offering in place of my son. That place I called it, the Lord will provide, an affirmation that became testimony of God's provision and faithfulness. Faithfulness of God, the angel of the Lord, blessed me a second time from heaven, promising him my servants. And together we returned to Beersheba, where I continued to live, reflecting on the profound lesson of faith and obedience that God had taught me on the mountain of Moriah. Sarah, my beloved wife, lived 127 years. Her death in Qoiriat Arb, today known as Hebron, in the land of Canaan. She left me in deep sorrow. I mourned her and mourned her. I mourned and mourned, feeling the emptiness her departure left in my life. After I left the place of her death, I went to the descendants of Het. I was in their midst I found myself in their midst as a foreigner without a plot of land to call my own. I said to them, although I am just a foreigner, but a resident alien in your midst, I beg you to grant me ownership of a sepulchre to bury my wife. I wanted to acquire it at the right price in order to establish a family tomb. Among FR present at the meeting, generously offered both the field and the cavern before all. Those present sang, I give it to you in the presence of my fellow citizens. Bury your wife. Thus the field of Ephron and Empel, together with the cavern, and all that it contained became my property, formally acquired before the leaders of the community. In that place I buried Sarah by marking the field of Empel in front of Mamre in Canaan as a family tomb. This acquisition, before the descendants of Het, secured a resting place for my family for generations, a testimony of my life among them, and of my commitment to the land promised by God. After Sarah's death, my heart found comfort and companionship in a woman I married, who blessed me with more children. She blessed me with more children, Zimran and Oxenmedan, Madian, Isbak, and Suash, thus enlarging the family that God promised me. Yoksan, one of my sons, became the father of Seba and Dan father of Seba, and Dan, continuing the lineage that the Lord had promised, would be as numerous as the stars from heaven, to Isaac. The son of the promise I bequeathed to Isaac, the son of I fulfilled what God had established and lived 175 years. I lived 175 years, a life full of challenges and blessings, marked by my relationship with God and my commitment. His commands, when my time came, I died in peace, peacefully satisfied with the life I had lived, and reunited with my ancestors, leaving behind a legacy of faith. And obedience. My sons, Isaac and Ishmael, despite distances and differences, they united to bury in the cavern of Empela's cavern, the place he had acquired as family tomb. I hope this story will inspire future generations to trust in God and follow his ways, just as I did. Subscribe to the channel to listen more stories. Give this video a like and share with your friends.